the topic, of course, is the state of women in technology and how we can help advance it. But I want to start, I'm an analyst, so I'm going to analyze the problem piece by piece and go through different segments of it. I wanted to start by discussing why this is important. You might hear economists and observers and politicians all saying this is a good thing for us to happen because it's good for the economy. Of course it is. Technology is now driving many aspects of the economy and is impacting all aspects of our society. So it's important to have more women, half of the workforce, contribute to it. It would increase our productivity. And it makes sense. It is good for the companies. Many studies have shown that companies that have a more diverse workforce do better both financially as well as in terms of their employee productivity. And of course, it's good for employees to be exposed to more diverse workforce, to work with women, and it increases their throughput. So all these things are true, and they are the most compelling reasons for us to push for more women in both leadership and different aspects of technology. But I want to start by saying that, if you go next page, please. We also have to do this because it is the right thing. It is important that it helps us to have a more productive economy when we have women in leadership roles as well as in rank and files of technology. But this is 2017. We fancy ourselves as a civilized generation now. We shouldn't be imagining it any other way, even if it wasn't good for our productivity or for our bottom line. Now, I'm not naive to think that this thinking will drive the push that we need to have more women in technology. Throughout the history, revolutions, different social changes have mostly happened when there has been an economic impetus behind them. And I think it will be the same case in here. And I fully support it. But I think let's just kind of put our value in here, put our stick here, that we have to do this because it's the right thing. All of us have to do it. Now, let's not forget that we will, of course, benefit from it. Not just because we will live in a more civilized society, but because we will have a better economy and more productive technology sector. So let's go to the next slide and talk about the key issues that I see in this topic of having more women. There are three aspects of it that I want to discuss. First, just the fact that we have insufficient representation of women in technology in all aspects, in all levels, not just in the top leadership, which is most prominent. The second that we are embarrassed to discuss in 2017 is the cases of sexual harassment. Not only it is wrong, it's unlawful, it's shameful, but it's actually an impediment towards this push to have more women in there. And of course, it also discourages women who are already in technology from being bold like the male counterparts and move forward. So it's an important issue. And finally, I guess tying these together is really our whole culture and attitude towards how we have to work together alongside men and women together and not have stereotypes about whether women can do X, Y, Z better or can men code better or write programs better than women. So these are the things that are underpinning the issues that we're facing in technology and here in Silicon Valley. But you might have noticed that it has become more of an issue, especially in the past year, a couple of years at most, but certainly in the past year, this year in fact. And if you go to the next slide, I discussed three reasons why I think this has become a hot topic now. First, as I mentioned, technology has become more and more important. It used to be that you turn on CNBC, we'll talk about the stock market in general. Nowadays, half of it is about Silicon Valley and technology companies. And for good reasons too, because it is impacting different aspects of our daily lives, not just the technology aspects. And of course, we have had some disastrous major companies in the news, like Uber, 500 startup. Just this morning, New York Times had a big piece on SoFi, social finance. An important aspect of this is that these are the cream of the crop of the valley. These are some of the highest valued private companies, the best performing ones. So I have to say, as a venture capitalist, it really saddens me deeply that our top performers are coming out like this. It is embarrassing. So that's one factor that we're seeing this more and more in the news, that our best performing, fastest growing companies are embroiled in the most unproductive and, of course, embarrassing situations. Part of this is because of what we believe in here in the Valley, that it's called growth at any cost. That means just go forward, don't think about other aspects of it. Don't think about profits. It worked for Amazon, it worked for Google on Facebook. And I'll talk about it in the next slide a little bit more. And I think part of it is also why we're so surprised is what I would call our snobbery here in the Valley. That we think we're the best, so these things couldn't happen to us. If it happens to a tabloid network like Fox, okay, I can expect that. But, we fancy ourselves as the smartest of the people around, so how could this happen to us? In fact, I was having a discussion with one of my venture capital friends a few weeks ago, and he said, why are people surprised? We see these people around us, and we see how they react. So I think this element of surprise is important to realize. It actually is partly why we're seeing these things, because in a way we thought that, no, there's nothing that wrong that these people should do. When I was at Parker Jaffray, we would go through very rigorous and actually very helpful training on not just, obviously not getting engaged in sexual harassment, but spotting it. And it was really helpful to open our eyes, my eyes even open to certain things of what things are not right to say because it might make my female colleague uncomfortable, even though I feel it's perfectly fine. So in the Wall Street and finance industries, these things have been going on for some time, and people have come up with ways to deal with it. But in here, we thought that, this is a startup. We just do things the smart way, fast way, nothing happens to us. That wasn't the case. So that's the reason we're seeing it now. But if you move on to the next slide, one really important aspect of it is what Jonathan Taplin in his recent book called Move Fast and Break Things. That you are expected to produce. You are not necessarily held accountable for how you do it. Of course, short of blatantly illegal or criminal activities, but basically the idea is that, think about it, some of the best performers are people who drop out of the college. And in fact, Peter Thiel has encouraged them by saying, if you drop out, the only way you can qualify for a Thiel grant or fellowship is if you drop out of college. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It encourages some creativity and it works well. But it really shows you the foundation of our thinking here in the Valley. That don't follow the rules, break them, and you will succeed. And if you don't believe it, look at the founders of Google, look at the founders of Facebook. So we encourage it. Now what happens is that if you do that, and you basically say, let me do it, and then ask for forgiveness, then you can carry on and do other things. And if you do that, essentially you start losing your own dignity. So that's something that we really have to address as investors, as board members. It is something that is imperative to instill in the managers and entrepreneurs that growth at any cost doesn't mean that you cross certain boundaries. We should hold our principles tight. There are things that are traditional, maybe they didn't work, maybe our education system needed to be reworked, maybe the way that businesses were run needed to be reworked. But there are limits to that. You have to know how far you go. And I have a hope and a feeling that maybe 10, 15 years from now, that would be the new paradigm, that we would know where to stop, not just keep going. So all of this is happening and is creating an awakening. This is actually, I noticed this quote in an article, I think just this week, that Shukri Merchant, founder of a company here called Hubhouse, said, this entire year has just been an awakening. People are realizing that it's not okay. Imagine that. In 2017, we're saying people are realizing it's not okay in all places in Silicon Valley. So this is pretty serious stuff, people. I mean, I'm glad you're having this discussion. I'm really glad you invited me, but I think there should be a lot more of these. We can't just go on by major, famous venture capitalists pledging decency. we have to have more discussions than that. So let's break down the problem and see what needs to be done. So we do need more women in science, technology, engineering, and math, as STEM is called. And that's really important. The push that the Junior League and other organizations have in this area, including Girls Who Code that I support and many other organizations, is important. So there has to be an impetus to push towards that. We can't just let the normal trends follow that. But I have to say, I also want to put forward the thought that technology sector is not about STEM. Many of the entrepreneurs that our company funds, that I have funded in the past, are not necessarily technical. The assumption here is that every startup entrepreneur is a geek and has been coding since he was 13, because they're mostly geeks. But that's not the case. If I look at the range of the companies that I have invested in about 30 companies, I would say probably half of them at least have the principal co-founder as not having a tech background. They come from business, they come from marketing, they come from healthcare, they come from consulting, from other areas. So let's first, yes, let's push for STEM, but let's also dispel the thought that you have to have a technical background to succeed in technology sector. So I really invite everyone, especially younger women, to join the sector and not be afraid that they don't have a technical background. And of course, we need it at all areas of the participation, not just necessarily in development, not just in the leadership. I think it's important to also recognize that when we get pictures of overachievers, people like Sheryl Sandberg and others, or if you look at the Fortune's 40 under 40, it was really encouraging. I actually counted about 30% of the teams, because there were 40 teams, but each of them, sometimes they had more than one founder, were women. And that's great. But these are in some ways exceptional people. So we shouldn't just say, that's your role model, you have to try to reach that. Not all of my friends are like that. In fact, very few of them are like that, whether male or female. We have to encourage people to participate at all levels, to get in there, get into the companies, have your vision, work with it, and continue to contribute to the company and grow. And finally, I do think that we do have to get rid of the implicit bias. Gender blindness is really important. I've been honored by some of my female friends who said, you really are gender blind, because I try to really not look at the gender as a lens, even if I want to correct for that. If you try to correct for it, then it really means that you need more work to do. But implicit bias is there. I know that some people will say, no, if we can't measure it, it's not really there, we can't really use it as a basic policy. Let me share with you a statistic that I actually saw yesterday in Financial Times about our very own industry. So this is very telling. I don't know if you can see the color, the charts in there. About roughly 45%, so close to half of the workforce in the venture capital industry is female. As you move up, though, in the senior positions, only about 26% are female. And as you move to the highest level, investment partners who make the decision, only about 11%. Now, venture capital industry is a highly human capital efficient. That is, it really doesn't require a lot of people. It doesn't require a lot of admin staff or marketing that traditionally people have said, well, there has been more representation of women in there. So there's no reason for this to happen unless there is an implicit bias in here. Because we're not talking about an industry like insurance or financial services that will have armies and armies of people for customer service and others. You have venture capital firms managing billions of dollars with maybe 30, 40 people at most. So this was a very telling chart when I saw that, and I said, oh my God, right in our own industry we have this major problem. So the question, of course, is, what do we do next? Well, I mentioned this several times, I want to mention it again. As Mark Andreessen said, software is eating the world. technology really has changed its course over the past, certainly 5 years, and I would say even 10 years, from just becoming a platform to do things more efficiently, like banks would use computers and software to do things more efficiently, to actually changing the way we do things in the first place. And think about Amazon as one example of it. It changed the way we shop. But there are numerous examples of it, even in areas that we don't necessarily consider, whether it's agriculture, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's space exploration. So technology is important, and this is just the beginning. That's why I think it's especially important to pay attention to representation of women in it. In some ways, when I look at it at a macro picture, financial industry has always been seen as the backbone of the economy, even though people don't consider it a very popular segment. But the idea is that without the liquidity that the capital that the financial industry provides, the economy will not really work. I think in the same way, technology is just beginning, and we won't really see it in the next 10 years. It's becoming the backbone of many other segments. So it's really important. Within technology, science and engineering and math and coding is very important. And I have to say it's easy. Let's also dispel this myth that you have to be super smart to get into these things. No, you just have to have some interest and drive to go in there. I really want to be able to get more and more representation from different levels of abilities and certainly different social classes, especially from the underprivileged areas, to come into STEM and do the coding. And it's becoming easier and easier with the new platforms out there. There are free online courses that can teach people how to code, for instance. And of course, as I said, we do need to be active about it. We can't let this just take its own course. We do have to talk about it. We do have to be vocal and push. And finally, we do really, as the scholar alluded to, we have to get the men involved. Train your husbands, your men, your sons and your brothers and others, and for us too, our sons and others, to be gender blind. It really is a part of our civility in this century to pay attention to it, to the degree that I hope when our sons and daughters are going through their adult life, they don't have to think about it. It will be part of their life, their daily thinking. So I wanted to really make this short because I'm hoping that if there are questions, we could engage in a discussion, see what else we can do. But I do want to share one thing with you. I really, if you saw that this was a fairly dry and boring presentation in terms of pictures, because I don't want to just showcase and role model say this is what you should do. But I do want to share with you some of the women who have inspired me. And if you go to the next page, these are women whom I've known, some of them for more than 15 years or so, some of them for a short period while I was on Wall Street and covering their companies. But I really selected people who inspired me in one way or the other. I learned from each one of them. So I thank all of them, and I thank all of you for listening to me today. Thank you.